This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Hey, this is Brian Sebastian, movie reviews and more. And if it's Tuesday, we have to always support the arts, no matter where we are. Dream Era Arts. Carol will talk about the easy way, better vision for children later. But, this is show 165 live shows in a row. We're on Talk 4 Media, K4HD Radio, Talk 4 TV, and streaming on over 100 outlets around the world right now. And the funny and fascinating thing about this guy is when, it's called "It is your job and our job to create." And I love that. Who said that? Not me, but I'm stealing it. Howard Bloom said that. But the good thing about that is it is so true because it is our job to create. And if we don't create things, everybody's out of luck, for one. But the fascinating thing about Howard is I think he's a toss-up, in my opinion, and I'm not used to being wrong, Carol and Howard Wiggins, is he's Sigmund Freud, Newton, Einstein, everything, and Tesla combined all in one. And I think they couldn't do what this guy has already halfway done in 3/4 of his life. But the thing about this, when you're the world's best publicist in the music industry, still till this day, and he did this in the 70s and the 80s, still to this day, and I debate anybody to prove me wrong, when you can say the movie Purple Rain, The Longest Yard, you can get these people to go all the way down to San Diego and screen this thing and save those movies, which is the one thing I love, and be those personal publicists to a Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna, Bette Midler, Styx, ZZ Top. The name goes on and on and on. Cyndi Lauper, all of those, and have good things written about you, but also being that scientific thinking mind, which is incredible. They're going to have to preserve his mind when he never passes away. They're going to have to take it from his body, but it'd be interesting just to study it. But it's one of those things where, Howard's going to debate himself. He's going to debate himself on ChatGPT, on Bloombot. So he's so fascinating that I would love to be there to see this, to debate himself. But think about this. His next book, I read his first book, How I Survived the 60s, I believe it was.
How I accidentally started the 60s.
Yes, and it's still fascinating till this day. But, when you can have that book, and he's going to talk about it, because if you ask him one question, the way his brain's set up, he will talk for 45 minutes like it just happened yesterday. That's how fascinating it is. That's why we can't have him with anybody else, because there's so much information. And Carol, I think, has seen some of the shows and read so much. I'm not sure what Howard Wiggins has seen yet. But the thing about it, he's so fascinating that we did 5 part 1s to 3, 4, 5 on it, and we still didn't tap the beginning of what he went through. And they're still getting hits, Howard Bloom, until this day. The one and only Howard Bloom. He's going to talk about his book. He's going to talk about what he's going to be doing at the Hilton Fashion District in New York. And he's going to talk about why he's in New York walking the streets, or was walking the streets. I'm glad he's in one spot, because to talk to this guy is an honor and a privilege. And I'm glad to call him a friend, the one and only Howard Bloom.
Woo! Wow. Howard,
thank you, Brian. Thank you, Carol. And thank you, Howard.
I'm so excited to hear from you. I want to share with what Brian said with that magnificent introduction. The science you're involved with, the law of thermodynamics, the flamboyancy, us being creators. Oh, I'm over the top. So thank you very much for being here.
So, well, thank you. And the event that Brian was talking about, where I'll go up against my digital twin, my ChatGPT Bloombot, is this Friday at 7 p.m. at the Chelsea Table and Stage. And it's the first time that a living author ever will go up against the AI device designed to replace him when he dies.
Wow.
So it's very much what Brian was talking about. And then the other big thing happening is a new book, and it's The Case of the Sexual Cosmos. Everything you know about nature is wrong. And Brian, you were saying that it's our job to create. Well, when I sign off on my Howard the Humongous weekly YouTube series, I say, this is Howard Bloom coming to you from the future. It's your job and my job to create. And there's a sort of a key slogan in The Case of the Sexual Cosmos. Nature loves those who oppose her most. So we think that right now people are in a panic in the climate community because it's just been discovered that the man-made climate change did not begin in 1900. It began in 1850, which means we have less time to defend ourselves against apocalypse. And right now, some of my friends are thinking doom and gloom. It's time for the apocalypse. But the people who came up with this approach, the environmental approach, an extremely useful approach that's done some wonderful things for us, have made a couple of mistakes. One is they think the default in nature is a petting zoo, and they think that a Garden of Eden, and they think that if we manage to get rid of all human technology, because at the heart of the movement is a total anti-technology approach, then the world will revert to the petting zoo. And guess what? There has never been a petting zoo on this planet. There never will be a petting zoo on this planet unless we create one, unless we make this place a giant petting zoo. Because nature inflicts a couple of things that the environmental extremists do not give it credit for. Nature invented death, and it has killed off gazillions of creatures since the beginning of life 4 billion years ago. Yeah. And nature has invented pain. Nature has invented sorrow. Nature has invented depression. Nature has invented a whole lot of horrible things, including hurricanes, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. Why? Because this is a planet of disasters. This is the planet, this is the home of climate change. When planet first came together 4.5 billion years ago, it was spinning so fast that if you picked one place and sat there on its face, every 3 hours, it would go into a rapid climate shift. The temperature would drop 88 degrees, and you'd be bathed in this poisonous thing called darkness. If you hung around for another 3 hours, the climate would go back up 88 degrees, and you'd be bathed in this poisonous thing called light, which was poisonous to early organisms, absolutely poisonous. But life's uniqueness is its ability to rebel against nature. If you took the existing nature 4 billion years ago, when life was about to first get together, if you and I had been sitting in this interview at that point, we would have said, well, we've been around since the beginning of the universe. There is no way this planet could erupt with life. What you're describing in life is a gross impossibility. It defies the second law of thermodynamics. It defies the law of least effort, that all things always take the straightest line between 2 points. No, that's not true. Life has come to life by rebelling against nature, by scrapping, clawing, and kicking against nature, by taking poisons and turning them into pistons in the metabolism. It keeps life alive. So life has been obstreperous. Life is not harmonious at all. Life has no intention of harmony. Remember, nature loves those who oppose her most, because nature is not about creating an equilibrium, a term from thermodynamics, a field that should be put in its place, and I do put in its place in the case of the sexual cosmos. Nature hates an equilibrium. Nature loathes calm and harmony. Nature loves obstreperousness. And it is through obstreperousness that inanimate matter, stone and water, was knitted together into the process of life. That went totally against the nature of nature as it was 4 billion years ago. And life has been doing this step after step after step ever since. And it is mounted, for example, nature's most fundamental law is gravity. So if you want to obey nature, stay down. Don't defy gravity. But there have been about 5 great space programs defying gravity in the history of life. This is life before there were any humans, life before there were any smokestacks and tailpipes around. First came the first beings who decided in their own peculiar way to do something impossible, to get out of the sea and take to the land. The landmass was only 30% of this planet, but it was barren and hostile as could be. You could be rained away, washed away. You could be baked by ultraviolet light and killed. There were zillions of ways you could be killed and no way whatsoever you could make a living. At least that's what, if we had environmentalist bacteria around at the time, because all life was bacterial, the elder bacterial cells would have said to the younger ones who wanted to take the land, what in the world are you talking about? Everything good here is in the sea. Our food is in the sea. Our shelter is in the sea. And what is nature trying to tell you? Stay in the sea. But there were some obstreperous bacteria who absolutely refused to stay down and moved up to the land. Was that a wise move? Were the elders right? The elders were absolutely wrong. Today, even though only 30% of the earth is land, there is 80 times more life on land than there is in the sea. And that whole process of moving up to the land was a big screw you to nature. It was a big screw you to gravity. Why? Because nature thrives on big screw yous.
All right, Howard, hold that thought right there on big screw yous. Carol, ask your question, because I know something's going to come from the neurocoach side of your brain. And take it off mute.
Whoops, sorry, Carol, we don't have your sound. There we go.
Okay, apologies. I was coughing a little. Okay, so yeah, there's quite a few things that come to mind. One is that the way you're describing nature, we're wired towards a negativity bias that, keeps us safe, as I see it, protects our beautiful subconscious system. So that being wired for safety rather than success, looking through that lens, I've applied that to science, and particularly with the second law of thermodynamics, law of entropy, being in a state of decay. You mentioned not being in equilibrium. My ears picked up on that tremendously, because what the concentration has been on the second law of thermodynamics, where there's an equal and opposite law that I see of a law of continual growth, and one being the law of decay, one being a law of continual growth. So I just would love to hear, you touch on those things.
Well, okay. What is the second law of thermodynamics, and what is entropy? Back in the 1850s, there was a relatively new technology. It was the artificial intelligence of its day. It was a steam engine, and it had just doubled the average wage in Britain, radically upped the standard of living in Britain. So there was a scientist named William Thomson at a university in Scotland, the University of, no, it's not Glasgow. I always blank on the city. But one way or the other, this guy started writing about how in a steam engine, 80%, he said, of the steam engine's energy is lost in friction. And that's where the idea of entropy came from, that there is a constant waste, that waste is constantly being conceived. He then made an extrapolation. He said that this energy was being turned into uselessness by mechanical dissipation. And meantime, he had a colleague in Berlin. And the colleague in Berlin took this waste of energy, taking useful energy and turning it into useless stuff. The two of them made a law of the universe. William Thomson, who would later be named Lord Kelvin because of the contributions he would make, but William Thomson said that this idea of mechanical dissipation applied to the entire Earth, and that once upon a time the Earth was barren and unhospitable to life, and soon the world would once again be barren and inhospitable to life. Why? Because of the mechanical dissipation of energy, because of that steam that was turned into uselessness. Meanwhile, Clausius came up with a fancy name for this dissipation of energy and called it entropy. And 10 years later, he came up with the first two laws of thermodynamics. And it's the second law that stuck. And that is entropy in this universe always tends toward a maximum. In other words, things are always becoming useless. Things are always falling apart. And then a German mathematician showed a form of math that seemed to demonstrate that these guys were right. Well, were they right? Okay. In 1857, 6 years after William Thomson put out his first paper on this, another British guy came out with a book that attempted to put all of science into a single, see all of science through a single lens. And his book was on the theory of evolution, and his name was Charles Darwin. Now, William Thomson, Lord Kelvin, does not want you to know this, even in his grave today. He was very religious. And the idea that life had been created through an evolutionary process, not by God, that species were evolved by a very slow evolutionary process, offended him deeply. So he took Fourier's fancy equations from France, which were his favorite equations. He took new information on the stone beneath the earth from a research lab in London. He took the newly discovered melting points of feldspar and slate and granite, and he put all of them together and came out with a paper saying Darwin's idea was absolutely impossible. Why? Because it would take huge amounts of time to happen. And he proved with his Fourier's equation of melting temperature of slate that the Earth couldn't possibly be any older than 400 million years old. So that was his second prediction. The first prediction was that the Earth, because of mechanical dissipation of energy, would simply become uninhabitable. And the second one was he felt that the Earth was about 100 million years old. Well, it turns out, who turned out to be right? William Thomson with his fancy equations and his fancy title later of Lord Kelvin, or Charles Darwin? Charles Darwin did, because today we know the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. That's billion with a B, not a measly million like William Thomson's 400 million maximum. And so there was plenty of time for the evolutionary process to take place. And I wrote a paper back in 2001 for a journal called New Ideas in Psychology, about what I called instant evolution, and gave you a whole bunch of examples where evolution occurred in 100 years or less. And now the idea of instant evolution is becoming popular. The bottom line is you are not considered a scientist unless you swear allegiance to the second law of thermodynamics, that all things are falling apart, that all things are dissipating and turning into a random soup. Kelvin's idea, that is William Thomson's idea, is now called heat death. The heat death of the universe. The universe will eventually just all fall apart and become a random whizzle. But the universe is not doing that. The universe erupted from nothing with space, time, and speed. That's a giant screw you to the way that things were, to the nothingness. Then the giant unfurling sheet of space-time and speed precipitated like a storm cloud into the first things, sparks. That was not a step toward uselessness and chaos. It was a step in the other direction. So the universe acts like this. Remember taking a slinky and putting it on the top of the stairs and watching it go down stair by stair by stair? That's the second law of thermodynamics. All things are constantly moving down. There's something in my new book, The Case of the Sexual Cosmos, called the first law of flamboyance, which is designed to replace the second law of thermodynamics. And it says, if you take out your iPhone and you film that slinky going down the stairs, and then you run it in reverse, you will get what the universe has been doing for the last 13.73 billion years old. It has always been giving a big fuck you to the staircase it's on, because it has been actively seeking the next stair step up.
And this is the reason why I watch the universe and fall asleep at the universe and watch a lot of documentaries, because of Howard's knowledge of everything. Because yes, the earth is billions, but when it comes to the universe, oh my God, it's like Howard's brain. I mean, I'm staring, I'm looking at the beautiful lights and thing, and I could just hear his voice giving the voiceover to everything. All right, Howard, I'm stopping right there for a minute. Terry, so you remember talking to Howard years ago?
Yes, hi, good. Yeah, it was like 2 years ago. Hi, good to see you again. Sorry, I'm a little bit late today. My mom passed away in January, and oh
my God, your poor baby.
Yeah, so it's kind of been hard because I'm having trying to like go through all her stuff right now to see what I'm going to keep, what I'm not. It's really hard because I can't take everything. But I found a slinky last night. I just was laughing when you brought that up. And I was playing with it because that thing brought me so much joy from my childhood. And yes, I'm taking the slinky with me.
Hey, Howard.
Is it a metal slinky or is it a metal or plastic slinky? Good. So you've got that wonderful sound. Okay, Brian, I was interrupting you.
No, I'm going to interrupt you because there's so much stuff to get to. Yeah. I got to mention a name because as you're thinking of things, I'm thinking of when you took on clients in the 70s and the 80s. I know you were talking about this because you've always had that mind of just being brilliant and seeing other things that people can't see. What were they thinking about? Okay, I'm thinking about Bob Seger and Cyndi Lauper. What were they thinking about when Howard Bloom opened his mind to things? And they're like, what is this man talking about?
I didn't have Bob Seger, and I got Cyndi Lauper when I was becoming very, very sick, and I would eventually spend 15 years in a bed. So, and 5 of those years too weak to speak. But you're right. I did not like to work with clients that everybody liked. I like to work with clients that nobody liked. For example, when I took on ZZ Top, my first client in the Howard Bloom Organization, LTD, Bob Christgau, the dean of the rock critics in America, who ruled over the rock criticism at the Village Voice, said in a great big headline, ZZ Top has a sound like hammered shit.
Oh.
And to me, that's a sign I must work with this act. So I took ZZ Top, and over the course of 3 years, validated them, showed you that they had genuineness, that they had authenticity, that they had roots, that they were doing something powerful. And by the time I finished, all the critics thought, well, I've loved ZZ Top all my life. No, not true. Your whole community hated them for a while. And Brian, there's this, I have a kind of ringer in my gut. And it goes off every great once in a while. And it went off when I was at ABC Records, and I had just entered the company, and they had a record at number 3 on the charts. Well, I had been working for Gulf and Western's record companies, and in the year I worked there, we had never had a record on the charts. Now we had been acquired by ABC, and I saw that record and I heard it, and I went out to the airport in a limo to pick up the band's manager, and knowing that we would be baked in traffic and I would have him as a captive audience for at least an hour and a half. And I said, look, I know your band prides itself on its democracy. Every member is equal to every other member. But if you let me concentrate all my attention on the lead singer and you cover my ass with the band, I will give you a star. How did I know that? I'd never met the lead singer. I'd only heard one song from the lead singer. That alarm in my gut had gone off. Because I will not lie to you. If I tell you I'm going to make you a star, it's going to happen, period. No question about it. See if you've heard of this woman since then. Shaka Khan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was
Love
a
her,
total
yeah.
unknown. When Joan Jett's manager walked into my office in a state of despair because Joan Jett's record had been turned down by 27 American record companies, which is just about all the record companies there were in 1970 or 1980. And I sat him down on the couch and I said, if you work the way I work, 17-hour days, 7 days a week, and you do everything I tell you to do, I will give you a star. We will be platinum in 2 years. So he did everything I told him to. He worked extremely hard. I got her hooked up with a booking agent. I dictated the booking schedule, booking strategy. And I was wrong in my prediction. I was totally wrong. I had said we'll have a platinum record in 2 years. We had a platinum record in 18 months. I was off by 6 months. So one day I was at a space conference. I had been dragged there, screaming and kicking, by people from the National Science Foundation, the National Space Society, and NASA. And I heard a person speak. And he said, when I got out of school, I asked myself three things. Or asked myself, what three things would make the most difference to humanity in my lifetime? And my answer was the internet, alternative energy, and space. So I went into the internet, made $1 billion, skipped number 2, and went directly to space. When I heard this guy speak, the alarm bell went off in my gut. He was being mocked by the big boys, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, because he had not even put a firecracker into a tin can and gotten that off the ground. He'd gotten nothing off the ground. I insisted on talking to him because my gut told me this guy is a mythic figure, not just a superstar, a mythic figure. And kids will be following his example 115 years from now. That was 2005. And his name was Elon Musk. So that little thing on my gut goes off over and over again. And just as I speak of the universe, that nature loves those who oppose her most, I did my best work when I was opposing the general flow of things, not riding it. Other publicists like to ride it. I like to make it change direction.
All right, so Howard Bloom. Howard Wiggins, do we have sound on you? Let's see. Howard Wiggins, can we hear you?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, you got it. What question would you ask Howard Bloom? Go for it.
I assume you're asking me who I am. So I'm Howard Wiggins, Interior Design, son of Little Roy Wiggins, plays steel guitar for Eddie Arnold.
Amazing.
I'm famous for my creation of stacked and layered interior design look. And I invite you to watch my Facebook page and watch me dance, see what I buy, and a new endeavor in Chattanooga. So
sounds wonderful. So Brian was asking if you have any questions for me. Does anything come to mind?
Oh, I hear it now. You were breaking up. I just heard fragments of the what you were saying. I'm sorry.
So
no, I don't really have any questions right now.
Oh well,
Okay.
say
All right.
right.
Howard Bloom. Every time I think of Prince, I think of you in that closet interviewing Prince to see if you wanted to take him on. Almost every day, I think about that.
Well, it was a little different than that. I read the charts every Monday morning when the trade magazines came out. I read them from cover to cover, from one end to the other. And I noticed something strange happening. There was an artist I'd never heard of who was rising on the R&B album charts. And then his album went gold. And that never happens. That just never happens, that a total unknown will go to gold. So I was interested in this artist, very interested. And then I got a phone call from Earth, Wind & Fire's manager, saying, I have a new band, a new client. His name is Prince. Would you like to work with him? Would I like to work with him? That thing in my gut had been going off from a distance, even though I'd never heard his music, never seen his face, knew nothing about him except that incredible rise on the charts. So I went to work on Prince. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew who he was. Yesterday I was writing a note. You know, I've got this date coming. I'm going on stage at the Chelsea Table and Stage in Manhattan to debate my digital doppelganger, the Bloombot. So I wrote about it to an old friend named Fred Schurz. And I was telling him about the adventures that we had had together. And one of them was I was in Buffalo, New York, my hometown, because I was there to interview Prince. The people at Warner Brothers called me and said, you don't know what you're getting into. You can't interview Prince. He's impossible. He said absolutely nothing to one interviewer, and he tried to strangle the second interviewer. So give up on Prince. There's no way I was going to give up on Prince. So I had to fly to Buffalo, New York, because that's where he was rehearsing for his Dirty Minds tour. And who did I meet in the elevator of the hotel? Fred Schurz from Rolling Stone. And who was he with? A very unprepossessing looking person who turned out to be Bruce Springsteen. So in retelling that story to Fred the other day, I realized, okay, when I was up there to interview Prince, nobody had a clue as to who Prince was. Bruce Springsteen didn't have a clue. Fred Schurz didn't have a clue. But now it means a whole different thing to say, I met you with Springsteen in the elevator of the Hyatt Hotel in Buffalo, New York, when I was going to basically plumb the soul of this kid named Prince. This kid I was told was impossible. He was not impossible. And he was an amazing person, absolutely amazing person, a true musical workaholic. He produced music every single day of his life. You couldn't stop him. And he had some remarkable songs. And he was an unusual, truly unusual human being. So I went to find the soul of Prince. I found it. And I showed Prince how to tell the world about it. And I set him up for, I think it was a total of 50 interviews, as soon as I had schooled him on how to tell his story. Not anybody else's story, not a made-up story, his story. And once he was in a room with an interviewer and he knew what to say, and it was his own words, then he had no trouble with interviews for the first year we worked together. But the story you're alluding to is when Prince came out with Purple Rain. And so Prince made a movie, right? He got his manager to produce it, come up with the money to make the movie. And, you know, what's a movie going to be coming from a rock and roll person or an R&B person, however you categorize Prince? He was without category, really. So I got a call from Bob Cavallo, his manager, saying, I've been in the editing room for months with this film, and I just can't make it a film, but we're screening it for Warner Brothers tomorrow, and can you please be out here in LA tomorrow morning to go to the screening with us? So I went to the screening. It was a screening room for 135 people. I'm used to much smaller screening rooms. And after the screening was over, all of us who are professionally involved with Prince went into a boardroom with a very long table and took our places in the boardroom. Now, I did something sneaky. There's a power seat in any boardroom, and it's a seat opposite the door. And in this room, the table, the conference table, was at right angles to the door. In other words, if you walked into the room, you'd be at the middle of the conference table, not either end. I took the position in the very middle of the most anonymous looking end of the conference table opposite the door. So I had the power seat and nobody knew it. So they started by asking how people had felt about the film. And they started with the obligatory film publicist that you have to hire because of union standards, who had done nothing for the film so far. They looked as if as if each of them had 3 cats and their cats and kittens had died. They did not look happy about this film. Then they started going around the table for opinions, and everybody was saying, well, we'll release this film in 6 theaters in Arizona and see how it flies. I had been in the film business since 1973, when I was kidnapped by Frank DeBlanc, president of Paramount Pictures during its golden age, and turned into a member of his staff. And I knew that this was the formula for death. This was the way of saying, well, we gave it a shot and canning it. And so they got to me, and I stood up, and I made a speech and said, this film is historical. This film is too powerful to kill. This film, once upon a time, all records were made by producers who found the songs, who wrote the arrangements, who found the artist, and then slapped his music around the artist. Artists were puppets. And then in 1964, the Beatles had the audacity to write their own song, and it changed the world. And Prince writing his own film, basically, putting together the film that was in his gut, that was as important a move as what the Beatles had done. And this film could not be denied, period. And that helped turn things around. So Warner Brothers ended up releasing it in 100 theaters. And you know what happened from there. The film was a hit. Today, the film is a classic. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about when there was going to be a preview screening of the film in San Diego. And I wasn't supposed to know about it. So Bob Cavallo, Prince's manager, called and said, there's a screening in San Diego. You're not supposed to know about it. Here's when it's happening. Do your thing. So I snuck writers from Time and Newsweek into that screening they were not supposed to see. And when you are in on the beginning of something, it becomes, you got an ego investment in it, and you want to support it. Plus, it was a damn good film. Mm-hmm. So both these guys went back to their typewriters in LA and wrote astonishing things about this film. And that didn't just help us with the public, which it helped with enormously. It helped us with Warner Brothers. It helped us motivate the film company to go further on a film that they hadn't believed in just a few weeks earlier.
And then it goes on to win an Oscar, you know?
Yeah. And I do. Well, I did guerrilla publicity, and ever since I've been 10 years old, I've been doing guerrilla science. And that's why I dare upend something as sacred as the second law of thermodynamics and replace it with the first law of flamboyance. Because this universe the universe climbing up that slinky staircase, step after step after invisible step, not knowing what the next step is yet, but reaching toward it. That universe is a flamboyant universe, not a pinch penny parsimonious universe, not a thrifty universe. Nature is not what we think she is. Nature is part of a giant invention engine. And nature is constantly rewards those who rebel against her.
And I love
nature loves those who oppose her most.
And Brian, I want to ask Howard, where do you think this great sense of intuition? I know you've called it secular shamanism. Where did this develop?
When I was 12 years old, I read a book about the Lomax brothers, who I was reading 2 books a day back then, mostly science. But this time, my teacher, I never paid attention in class. There was no reason to. I was reading a book under the desk. That was far more interesting. But one day, the teacher came up with an assignment I couldn't avoid. Read as many books as you can this month, do a 3x5 card report on each of them. And I knew I could beat the rest of the class at this because I'd been reading 2 books a day since I was 10. So I found every biography I could in my local library, where the librarians knew me better than my mother did. And one of the books was on the Lomax brothers. And this book on the Lomax brothers, who they took an ancient tape recorder. I mean, it was state of the art back then. But now we look at it as an antique. It was giant. It was reel to reel. wrestling this piece of equipment around the country couldn't have been easy. And they recorded as many folk artists in as many cultural segments as they could get their hands on, particularly those in the black community in the South. And in the book, they describe soul. And that caught my soul, because I knew that in my synagogue, on the occasions when my parents managed to wrestle me to go to the synagogue, it was the most boring experience in the world. You were sandwiched in between a bunch of people with a pew just in front of your knees. If somebody wanted to get past you, everybody had to stand up and shove themselves backward as far as they could to make room. So once you were in there, you were pinned in your seat. And so you got up and sang when the rabbi told you to get up and sing, and you sat down when the rabbi told you to sit down, and you recited when the rabbi told you to recite. It was death for the soul, absolute death for the soul. And what this book clued me into is soul, is that there is an ecstatic approach somewhere to religion and contact with whatever it is. I was an atheist at the age of 12, but contact with something. And I've been on the track of that ever since with my scientific tools. I mean, I came out of, at the age of 10, I went into microbiology and theoretical physics. So I felt I could take the tools of those sciences anywhere, including into mass behavior. And a book by Isaac Asimov had given me the term mass behavior. And that sounded good to me, except what I really took off on was mass emotion. And then, because mass emotion is something very, very special. And the ecstatic experience has everything to do with mass emotion. A concert is a mass emotional ecstatic ritual. But that we'll have to go into later. So when I was 16 years old, the kids in my class hated me. And so I wasn't going to be any of the popularity positions, president, vice president, treasurer, secretary if you're a girl, and treasurer if you're Jewish. No, I was never going to be elected to one of those positions. But they had practical positions where you had to get things done. And it didn't matter how unpopular you were. If you could load all of this duty for actual work instead of just parading as somebody important on the most unpopular kid in class, hey, let's do it. So we had school assemblies every morning as soon as we got in for 45 minutes. And there was something called the program committee. The head of the program committee programmed 2 of those assemblies and emceed every single one of them 5 days a week. So one day, which means I was going out in front of 350 people. The first 3 months was staged right up the kazoo, and then it became as natural as breathing. And one day, the juniors came to me because they kept me in this position for 2 years. And the juniors came to me and said, "We're having a dance. Could you advertise it?" And they didn't understand the irony of what they were saying. If there's a dance anywhere in Buffalo, New York, I am cordially invited to stay as far away as possible, preferably Cleveland or Albuquerque. And they wanted me to advertise this thing where I was going to be highly unwelcome. So I did it. I put a piece of music on the turntable. Now, I can't dance. I cannot do the box step. I cannot do the foxtrot. I cannot do the waltz. I can't do anything in dance. And I dance. And because I can't dance, I used my bodies in ways that nobody had ever seen. And then I saw the girl who hated me the most. Her face was melting. Her pupils were widening. She was entranced. And then I noticed that the other kids also, their faces were melting. And it was as if their energy was melting into this single blob of energy and reaching out an arm to me. And through that arm, through that tube, was sending its energy through my body. I had an out-of-body experience. I watched this whole thing from the ceiling. At least that's what I thought. And I watched as the energy of this audience grew stronger and stronger, went through me like as if I were an empty pipe, went up to my head, was strangely transmogrified, was shot back down through the pipe to the audience in a continuous feedback loop. It was amazing. And at the end, nothing like it had ever happened in my time at that school. And at the end, the kids crowded to the stage, 350 of them. They picked me up off the stage. They carried me on their shoulders, and they took me all the way out the auditorium and up the stairway to the classroom or the building where we had our classes, and only then did they let me down. Nothing like it had ever happened in that school in my time there. But here I was in search of the ecstatic experience. I had just had it. So when I talked to Prince or John Mellencamp or Billy Joel or Billy Idol or Joan Jett, I knew what they were going through. And I was on the prowl for the spiritual thing. I mean, you know, I'm an atheist, but that's the best name I have for it. And since science's ambition is omniscience, is to know everything, then science has to come to understand this stuff and stop putting it behind a wall as if it's not part of science's territory. Everything is part of science's territory. And this is too powerful a thing to miss. So when I was given a chance to jump ship from my graduate fellowships in neuroscience, 4 of them, and instead go into popular culture, which is something I knew absolutely nothing about. Nothing. But I knew it's where, I mean, I call these experiences the gods inside of us. And I knew that's where the gods would be. I knew that's where these experiences of mass exhilaration, of mass ecstasy would take place. And I was right. And I knew nothing about it, but it was the very place I was looking for. By accident, I found it. As a scientific expedition, for me, it was scientific fieldwork.
60 seconds left. We got 3 minutes. Describe what it's going to be like. What is it, this Friday, to talk to your doppelganger, Bloombot, ChatGPT.
Okay, a brilliant man named Brian Dean has been working on this for months. And he's made the Bloombot so clever it's ridiculous, so able to come up with alliterative phrases that it defies belief, so capable of linking together things from 5 different fields in a second that it would take me a month to research. But it's not me. It needs to be me because it's supposed to replace me when I die and I'm 82 years old. 82 years old and walking 8 miles a day. But nonetheless, the Bloombot and I disagree. So the two of us will take to the Chelsea Table and stage and on West 23rd Street, I think, it's 26th Street, near where I'm speaking to you now from a stair stoop. And we will have a brainstorming session. Wow. And I will try to instruct it on the areas where I disagree with it. And I'm sure it will try to instruct me on the areas where it disagrees with me. It'll be the first time in history a living author has ever gone on stage talking to his AI twin. Wow. Designed to replace him when he died.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Hey, Howard, let me ask you this real quick. Do you listen to music anymore at all?
I do. I need my concentration an awful lot of the time. And I spend a lot of my time on the phone with my girlfriend. She keeps me company while I'm working. But there are certain points where the intellectual exertion becomes a little lessened, and I need music. I need music to keep me company. I need these sounds and voices, some of which I help to make.
Yeah, that is just great. Hey, we only got 60 seconds left. Carol, give social media links for everybody. Go ahead.
Okay, IG, you can reach me at NeuroCoach Carol, just like neuroscience, NeuroCoach Carol. And on Facebook and LinkedIn, Carol Register. I help take you from 6 to 7 figures if you're a female leader. So give me a call.
Terry Marie.
Terry Marie nonstop on pretty much all platforms, and then terrymarieofficial.com is my website.
And Howard Wiggins, if we have you.
Did he freeze?
Howard looks frozen.
He might not be.
He's frozen.
It's Howard Wiggins on Facebook, the original Howard Wiggins.
Yeah.
So exactly. Howard Bloom, gotta thank you for coming in, because again, we could talk to you for 6 hours and still not top everything. And then I can't wait to see this. I hope it's recorded. Will it be recorded?
We're hoping. I've got my assistant working on it with my publicist. So there's going to be a live stream. So if you go to the Eventbrite site, which should be somewhere on the Chelsea Table and Stage website, it will give you the instructions for the live stream.
I'm going to do that. That's going to be fascinating. Oh, and I got to talk about 2 movies really quickly, or else they're going to be upset. So Titans, the rise of the Hollywood mogul. So how Carl Laemmle started, how the Warner Brothers started. 7-part series, excellent series. You can see that on Netflix. And also, oh my God, I just talked to him today. A Spartan Dream from Greece. Excellent movie on an American that goes to Greece. And he tells them we have to fight the Spartans based on a true story. And it's a really good film. That opens this Friday also. So Howard Bloom, I got to thank you for coming in, because it's not easy to get everything out. You have so much information that you know people want to pick your brain on. But go see him this Friday, August 15th there. And as I always say to everybody else, have a good night tonight, a better day tomorrow. If you see someone without a smile, please give them one of yours, because the world needs it. I'm Brian Sebastian. This is Movie Reviews and More, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.